Hello and welcome to Walk the Talk. I'm Shekhar Gupta and my guest today, somebody who's had a vantage position to look at the world and particularly this region for more than 3 decades. Stephen Hadley, former National Security Advisor and now one of the principals of Rice, Hadley, Gates. You can't get 3 better second names to run a consultancy firm.
Great to be with you today.
Thank you. And you are an old traveler to these parts. What brings you here now?
Well, I am chairman of the board of an organization called the U.S. Institute of Peace, which has
it's run by the Congress.
Funded by the Congress, and it has programs to try to help resolve conflicts and avoid conflicts. They have programs in Afghanistan and Pakistan. I wanted to observe those programs, but having come to the region, you can't come to the region without coming to India. And I wanted to catch up with some old friends and also get India's take on all the dynamic things that are happening in this region.
And shall I say that we are fortunate that USIP has no programs for India? That means we have no conflict.
There you go.
So should we get
Exactly
something
right.
started to get your attention?
No.
Or we're better off not having your attention?
Better out not having attention for that, and I'll come anyway.
You will come anyway, because you came here a very long time back, the first time.
Yes, actually, the first time I left the country, the United States, to go abroad, the first country I came to actually was India in the summer of 1972, which is a long time ago. India is a very different country now.
Steve, I'll remind you, I'll jog your memory, the context of when we first met. It was when you were still Deputy NSA. India and Pakistan looked like they would go for each other's throats anytime yet again. And we had a very small dinner at Ambassador Blackwell's home.
True.
With C. Raja Mohan and Mr. Naresh Chandra. And there's a little background to that. Because I had once been disinvited to Ambassador Blackwell's home. And I was getting even with him by accepting all invitations from there on and cancelling on the last day. and I got a call from Mr. Naresh Chandra, who's a former ambassador to Washington, saying that Bob Blackwell has asked me to speak with you and to reason with you that this is not one of those ego things. This is a very important man. He told me in Hindi, bhai, ye bahut important aadmi hai, is a very important man. He has a very good mind and he is going to be the next NSA. So you give up your boycott and come. And I must say, I learned a lot talking with you because you came across as somebody who had a fundamental belief in changing the relationship with India.
That is true, but the important thing, I think, was not that that was just my belief. The important thing was that it was the belief of President George W. Bush, who during the 2000 campaign for the presidency made it very clear that one of the great opportunities with the United States and for his administration, if he were elected, was to change the character of the relationship between the United States and India. So it was an agenda really from the very first days of the Bush administration.
So these were American minds that were dehyphenated about India.
Right, and the important thing though was they were American minds that saw that India was going to emerge on the world stage. It was going to break out of the barriers of South India and become in some sense India on the global stage. And the issues that we were going to face on that global stage, global challenges, India would have an impact and a say on them. And the president wanted to make sure that when India and as India emerged on that global stage, they would have good relations with the United States and we would maximize the possibility that India and the United States could work together to solve these global issues. That was the vision.
So if you look back on this period, a stint out of power gives you also an opportunity to look back. See how much Pakistan has fallen since then in stature, and how much India has risen in stature.
You know,
India. I'll not ask India why Pakistan. Could Pakistan relationship have been handled better?
One of the things we did in the Bush administration, and let me say that the breakthrough or the change of policy with India, one of the great things about it, has been a bipartisan change, supported by Republicans and Democrats. President Clinton really, in a way, started this process with that lengthy visit he took to India in, I think, 1999, in the waning years of administration. It gave us a platform to work on. And the Obama administration, since 2009, has been standing on the shoulders and further developing the relationship based on what we did on the Bush administration. So it's been a project over three administrations.
Clinton came 99.
99.
Yes.
It's been a project over three administrations, supported by Republicans and Democrats. And while Republicans and Democrats have a lot of things to fight over these days, the U.S.-India relationship is not one of them.
But could India and the US have shared strategic approach towards Pakistan? Because both have a very strong vested interest in moderating the nature of Pakistan's society and polity. Couldn't we have a joint strategy?
Well, I'm not sure what it means to have a joint strategy. We certainly talked a lot about India and Pakistan, but you know, one of the premises of our approach to India is that every time you talked about India, you didn't have to talk about Pakistan, and every time you talked about Pakistan, you didn't have to talk about India. That these were important countries to the United States, and we should have relationships with each that were not tied to each other.
But the issue is that you will go away in a way, you as in Western powers, NATO, from this whole called AFPAC. I'm using the words of Prime Minister David Cameron. We have to live next to this region called AFPAC, and for our sakes, it better not remain a whole. So that shared vested interest, don't you think US policy could have addressed better and made India an ally much more than it has done?
It's possible. I'm not sure. You know, ally in terms of Pakistan is interesting. One of the things is if the goal...
That will be a China moment. That will be a Nixon-China moment.
Well, but if the goal is trying to get Pakistan to break completely with terror and be constructive in the region as a force for stability, then you need to decide whether a more explicit and public cooperation between India and the United States would help that. And I think the likelihood is that it would not. And therefore, the important thing is for the United States and in India to talk about all these issues. You know, there is an opportunity in Afghanistan for a reconciliation process with the Taliban in which Pakistan is playing a role. Well, that has implications for India, and the United States and India quietly ought to be talking about that and to make sure that that reconciliation process, if it moves forward, does so in a way that enhances regional security and does not compromise India's security. And one more thing, if I might say about that, I think India has a stake in the success of that process. This is a region that has too much terror and too many terrorists. And if you can bring some of the terrorists out of an insurgency, that's a good thing. And India ought to be helping Afghanistan at this moment of difficult transition. And you can help Afghanistan diplomatically and financially, and they need financial help.
I agree with you in principle, but you know, if you look at public opinion, everybody will soon remember that the new chief of the Taliban was the man who escorted the hijackers of IC-814, which was taken to Kandahar. So, in Indian public opinion, he should be a global terrorist. Those are very painful recent memories for India. So how do we get over them?
They are painful memories, and they're painful memories for the United States. India, the United States have both
They're also
been
humiliating memories for India.
all true. The question is, how does this end? And if people who are part of an insurgency are willing to come out of that insurgency, lay down their arms, support the Constitution of Afghanistan,
If that happens,
and be reintegrated in society, India will have to decide
if that happens,
whether it's in its interest for that to happen.
See, for me, one of the low points of our diplomacy was Mr. Jaswant Singh, who's very sick now, then our foreign minister, going with those terrorists to Kandahar and addressing to TV cameras, in front of TV cameras, this gentleman as my friend, His Excellency so-and-so, Minister of Civil Aviation of Afghanistan. Now, number one, there was no civil aviation in Afghanistan. Number two, it wasn't a government we recognized at that point. And to have, and it does look like that maybe things are not improving that much. Maybe the bad guys are winning in Pakistan as well as Afghanistan. You counter that? I'm putting an extreme proposition to you.
I think one of the things we have to be is very realistic about this process. And I think one of the interesting things of the people we talk to in Afghanistan is people are very realistic. They understand who they're dealing with. They are very skeptical about this process. But they also, even the most skeptical, said it is worth a try. And I think that's where we need to be. It needs to be worth a try. The United States and India have to have good communication about it. And we should never forget the character of the people we are dealing with. We need to be very realistic about that. But if there is a way
Will you elaborate
to bring
on
the
that
violation,
character of the people?
Taliban has a lot of blood on its hands,
Right.
obviously, and a lot of innocent Afghan
Frankly,
blood.
so does Pakistan Army.
And if
And ISI,
the
yeah.
issue is,
I would say a lot of innocent Indian blood also.
I would agree with that. That, of course, the victims of terrorists are almost always innocent. And the question is whether there are elements of the Taliban willing to come out of the insurgency, and whether Pakistan, which has now stepped forward as convening the Murray meeting here on July 7th, whether Pakistan is willing to use its influence to encourage the Taliban to reconcile with the Afghan government. So we're at a moment of testing. Nothing is guaranteed. Skepticism is justified, but we ought to see whether there's an opportunity here.
But should not be cynicism.
Test the Taliban, test Pakistan, and help the Afghan government. This is a time for India in a constructive way to help the Afghan government, and where your help can really be important is on the economic side, because the drawdown of 120,000 coalition troops,
Right.
and the reduction in international assistance has created an economic crisis in Afghanistan, and India could help.